Which video should I start with? Sorry.
Well, it looks like for some reason, well, that explains it. It looks like I have the wrong time frame on the setup for some reason. I'm still going to go live though.
I think you're live. I think we're live now.
Oh, are we live?
I thought I saw it.
Okay. Well, we're not live on LinkedIn, but that's okay.
Okay.
Let's get rid of that. There we go. Save change.
I gotta adjust my window here a little bit.
Okay. Well, listen, we're having little technical difficulties. Hopefully, we are live. Greetings and salutations, test takers. This is our Tuesday live. We'll take care of some housekeeping. Tell us what exam you're taking and where you're joining us from, and we'll get the housekeeping out of the way. And then, Brian, I'll help you with any content if we're able and willing. If you are going to ask a question, please do so in the format of SIE or S7 with a capital Q. That helps us a little bit in answering because there's a lot of overlap on exams, and maybe it's less depth or more depth depending on what kind of exam you're taking. If you're looking for a free supplement to your paid study materials, there's no better thing than my YouTube channel. There's over 1,500 videos. There's a playlist for your exam, and that's how I've organized it. So if you're taking the SIE, for example, you'd go to the SIE playlist. There's 4 of them. The playlists are in suggested watch order. The videos are in suggested watch order. If you're looking for a particular topic, please use the channel search bar. You know, it's okay. Tonight, Brian knows we're going to get asked the same question, asked and answered many, many times in video format or in person. And it's okay. We'll do it. But, you know, if you put accrued interest, for example, in the channel search bar or margin call or whatever, that's a way to find particular topics. Now, if you're looking for a paid supplement, I think the best paid supplement going is Brian's Test Geek content. It's a video course, a PDF, all in. He's been kind enough to give us a 20% discount on that. So all in, it's about $100. If you don't have a Kaplan Q Bank already, until Brian writes a Kaplan Q Bank or a Test Geek Q Bank, it's the best out there. It has a performance tracker. Guru 15 is the discount code to checkout. That's about $50. So with Brian and Kaplan Q Bank all in, you're about 150 on that investment as a paid supplement. On my booking page, everything on the YouTube channel is free, but nothing on my booking page is free, with the exception of a weekly jam session we do. So if you want to attend that, that's free. I cap it. So if you don't find it, it means it's capped out and then it falls off the booking page. That is my booking page. You would go to the class tab and you would find the Q&A jam session. We also on that have the tab if you win the coaching call. If you win our coaching call at the end of our thing tonight, you do not win tutoring at a date and time of your choice. No. You win a coaching call and you register on that class tab. If you're having difficulty, you can send me an email, and I'm more than happy to send the link directly. We are coming up, Ryan, on 1,000 members of our Facebook community, Baby Brokers Doing Hat Tricks. I think we're at 997. Baby Brokers is a term of endearment for rookies in the securities industry. And a hat trick is 3 successes in a limited time frame. SIE 766, SIE 663, you get the idea. We also have Reddit communities. We have a Reddit community subreddit for R Series 6 is for 6. R Series 7 is for the SIE and Series 7. R Series 66 is for all the NASA exams. And R Series 24 is for all the principal exams, 9, 10, 24s, you know. When we also 57, 79s, all those esoteric stuff. Okay, so let's see what we got, Brian, going in the comments. Just before we do get started, what happens a lot of times is people will tell Brian and I they've encountered some kind of questions that we've never heard of. And then it's sometimes when it's experimental, it's being tested for validity. And then what will happen is we'll get more debrief, and then we'll finally figure out what people are being asked and what they should be prepared for. And every once in a while, Brian, somebody will say, oh, it wasn't in the test specifications. Well, Social Security is, and so this question may not be listed directly as IRMA, but what is income-related monthly adjusted income, IMRA, on the 65 and 66? On debrief, people tell me they've had the acronym without kind of spelling out the truth and labeling part of it. Once you know what that acronym is for, it kind of makes sense. This is a surcharge on Medicare. And then the second thing that has been coming up in debrief is this: what part of Medicare does the surcharge apply to? And it applies to Part B and Part D. So there you go. I think, Brian, we finally got a kind of a handle on that question. So
That's right. Yeah.
now let's see what we can help people with in terms of new stuff. Okay, first one we got is John. John, I'm going to go through all of your things, but usually our I don't know what's the way to say, common courtesy in our live stream Q&A, John, is one question answered, and then you can put in another question. But we'll go ahead and knock out all three of these. Can you give a brief overview of qualification, coordination, notification? I'll start, Brian, with notification isn't a method of registration.
Thank you.
Notification,
I'm glad you said that.
yeah, notification is for test purposes. It's primarily for mutual funds, federally covered securities mutual funds. And I think of it as kind of a common courtesy, John, to the state administrator, a way to pay fees, the way I think of it. Coordination is pretty straightforward. That's if I'm doing an S1 registration with the SEC. At the same time, I'm going through that process. I'm going to coordinate with any states I plan on selling it in. So that leaves us with I can't coordinate. So if I can't coordinate, that's qualification. The state administrator spells out what I need to do to qualify my security to sell to his or her residence. Take here, Rule 147, intrastate offering of security. Right? Rule 147, we're not actually registering it with the SEC, so we can't do coordination. Is coordination SEC and state simultaneously effective? The answer is yes. Qualification is for intrastate. There you go. And that's right. When deemed effective. So once it's effective, I have a year to go out and raise some money. Brian, you want to add anything to that?
No, that's it. Other than the fact, I believe you've already mentioned this too. You might get one question on this.
Yes.
It's not a lot.
Yeah. Make sure. I know it's hard when you don't. Come Tuesdays. One reason you want to come to Tuesdays is so Brian and I can tell you whether you're on the broad avenues and highways of a particular registration series exam, or whether you're getting into the weeds. And Brian and I believe that a lot of test prep vendors don't mean to intentionally, but boy, can they take you into the weeds. Particularly, Brian, like the laundry list of exempt issuers and exempt securities, and then a whole another laundry list of non-exempt transactions and non-exempt securities. I think a more target-rich environment on NASA exams is disclosures, unethical business practices, and then the investment stuff that you may not be familiar with based on your 7 for 66. And Brian and I both agree. John tell us he's taken 66. So we both agree 65 can be very challenging because a lot of the 65s don't have a 7 and haven't done investments. And so that could be a real challenge. All right. I passed the 63. Woo! Brian, did a great job. He's really good. He's a master distiller of NASA information. Take a short break. I'm wondering, Walter, why you're doing a 63 and a 66. That's kind of odd. Hey, it is what it is. A 66 is a combination of a 63, 65. So not sure what that's about. Maybe you don't have sponsorship and you're seeking sponsorship, but that's kind of a weird combination. The live classes for 66. Want to supplement with your videos and podcasts, Brian? What video do you suggest I start with? Well, with Brian, you buy his entire video set, and it's a video version of a 66 class. So I think, Brian, it's in sequential order, I would imagine, or they can do it any way they want.
It follows the NASA content outline, the 4 content areas. Is how all of my videos are created and designed. As far as the podcast, if you're doing the 66, you better start with the first. You're asking
about on the YouTube channel. Brian and I have done a podcast on the 66. We're very proud of it. It's contributed a lot of testing victories, and I think, Brian, they should start with that. All those episodes. I think there's 5 or 6. Just what it looks like, bookend to bookend, if you will, cover to cover, so to speak. I also think if you're not a reader, we always believe you should read the book. But that's another way to kind of put a dent in perhaps the reading as you go into the book. So, yeah, check out that podcast. Oh, my content, I would tell you, is organized in playlists.
In
I
order.
have in the 66, I think 3 playlists. I have the podcasts, I have lectures. In the lecture set, Brian did an evening class. We got to do some more of this, Brian. But Brian did a evening class for us called Definitions of Registrations from Persons. And my goodness, it has made major contributions to test taking victories on NASA exams. So make sure you check that out in the playlist. And then my last 66 playlist is just practice tests. Kaplan, Test Geek, Knopman, and there's me doing it and me and a student doing it. And you can watch some of those if you like. I have my 65 tomorrow, just pulled an 84 on Brian. Wow. Yeah, definitely in good shape. I think very strong correlation. I would be very surprised, Trevor, if you don't make your mark based on 85. Now, I'm assuming that was the first time through it. I'm assuming you didn't memorize questions and answers, but you're in very good shape. Yes. Brian.
Yeah, take that test once. That's it. We don't take it 6 times.
Yeah, I took
And hopefully he's got some other material like Kaplan simulated exams.
I had that friend. He told me he got like a 90 something on one of your practice tests.
I know too.
And I said, there's no way. He said, are you calling me a liar? I said, I'm just making it perfectly clear what a liar I am if you are telling the truth. I find that difficult to believe you pulled a 90 something on that first time through. Brian has. Along with Kaplan for the SIE, would you recommend I focus on Test Geek? Yeah, for sure. So yeah, why not? The paid supplement. Yeah, STC quizzes. I don't know. I prefer Kaplan, and then Brian as a paid supplement. That's my kind of, I think my favorite. But hey, there's no reason you can't do STC quizzes too. I mean, make sure abundance is better than scarcity. But just make sure you don't get too many voices in your head. So you want to. I had a guy, Brian. His name is David Bach. He's the guy who wrote The Automatic Millionaire. But he was a Dean Witter baby broker that I helped to his exams. And when he came to class, he literally had bought every test prep vendor course available. And he had it in like this Foot Locker that he brought into the class. I go, now you realize that's just the same stuff sliced and diced differently. You're not responsible for all that. It's just different ways to get through it. So I believe if you have the resources, it is not a time to be frugal. If you want to make a sweat equity or a financial equity investment in yourself, these exams is the time to do it. So would I recommend Test Geek at STC if you have the resources? Why not? But if you have limited resources, maybe Kaplan and Test Geek if you have to make decisions about how much you afford.
And don't forget the FINRA practice exam on the SIE.
Yeah, I just had somebody tonight, Brian. They hadn't done it yet, which I kind of like because, they hadn't done it yet and it was available to them still. So right on.
Exactly.
I have 2 versions, CT, of that. I was telling the person this evening, Brian, we did our paid free office hours for paid students just before our session tonight. And I told her, I said, there's 2 versions on my channel. You can go to my SIE practice test playlist and you can watch me do the FINRA exam. You can hit pause, hit play, see how you did. And then I wrote my own doppelganger version of it, which is I took their answers and then wrote different questions. Because distractors, that's the technical name for wrong answers. And on that practice test, a lot of the wrong answers are right answers to different questions. So I got both versions. I got the FINRA version, and then people get mad because I didn't provide the answer key to that particular exam. And I did it intentionally because I'm not trying to. Who cares if you get ace that thing? It's an intellectual inventory to get a mark, and I didn't want to compromise that answer key. So, but anyways, you'll know at the end whether you got it right or not. All right, woo! All right, be back for Series 7. Yeah, refresh, reset. Don't take too long, but enjoy your testing victory, and we'll see you on the 7 playlist for sure. There is a lot of content, Justin. I mean, we're coming up on 7 million views. I'm not sure if that's just Justin watching one SIE video 7 million times. We're up on 50,000 subscribers. I would have never thunk in a million years. We have over 1.5 million watch hours. So, Justin, you said you watched tons of my content. I just can't believe I'm honored and privileged that people want to spend that much time with me. I don't even want to spend that much time with me. Failed the 65 3 times. Jeff, we hear this a lot. The 65 is a really challenging exam. Took a break. I like it. Going to start getting again on May 15th. Reset, retest in mid-September. How should I go about this time? I would recommend, Jeff, that you do just what we recommended. I think it was Justin. No, Justin was the SIE. John was 66. Who was the 66? Anyways, they were asking us CT. There we go. I think you should start by watching Brian and I's podcast. We've done a 65 podcast. I would start by watching that just to kind of get your brain going again, get fired up a little bit, and then turn to on, renewed study effort. I would recommend reading the book. You're going to be more informed this time reading the book. If that is something you just can't bring yourself to do, maybe it's time to buy a different vendor, get a different voice, different book to read, start doing those quizzes. And I love that you are still resilient, Jeff. You're going to do well in our industry. Brian and I know many, many people who have had the misfortune of having difficulties getting through these exams and finally breaking through, and then doing very well for themselves, their clients. And so I'm glad that you're sticking with it. It will pay big dividends for you. Brian, any comments you would like to add to that?
Oh, I got so many comments about this. We've been doing this for so long. You and I both have close to 30 years of doing this.
Yeah.
And this 65, I know how frustrating it is for people to have to pass it or take it 2, 3, 4 times. And it's just as frustrating for us watching these folks suffer through taking these tests. There's got to be a disconnect somewhere, and it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, Brian sometimes thinks it's
got to find the holy grail to fix this thing.
Yeah. Sometimes, Jeff, we believe that it could be test-taking techniques, perhaps. So, what you want to do, I will link in a video description. I have a video, you failed, is it over? Spoiler alert, the answer is no. And I have 5 recommendations about how to respond to this misfortune. I'm not sure if you watched it yet. But one thing is we don't want to repeat what we've done. So Brian's thing about the Holy Grail, you want to look at those 3 previous efforts and say, what do I need to do? Do I need to, just pretend I never did that? Or is there something I can do different this time? What did I do last time that I didn't find productive? So yeah, you're searching for that. And the other thing is just, you just have to overlearn. We have to make sure that the next time we have a margin of safety, that we know going down there that this time is going to be the time you slay that 65 dragon. We don't know your scores, but I always joke, Jeff, you've been in the cave 3 times. You got a good look at this 65 dragon. He's still there, and I think you're going to get him next time. And then try as much as possible. Give yourself some grace, and try not to take a hit to your self-esteem, because that's obviously you're resilient because you're still in the game. And remember, it's only the last time you take it and get that passing score that matters. Nobody cares how long it took you to pass this. I personally think, Jeff, I'm not suggesting that we should fail just to, fail. We want you to pass first time. But I think it's a lot about people. When I'm maybe a supervisor or somebody who's hired you and you show that resilience, it makes me think, wow, I'm glad this is a guy I'm going to continue to be working with. And when you get it done, I haven't brokered it. If you go out and tell people, Brian, if anybody knows this stuff, it's me. I had to take this damn test 5 times. So people invest with you, Jeff, because they like you and they trust you, not because you're a good test taker. Oh, Brian, I put a little short up, Jeff and Brian. And I said that if you got over the days when we got over scores of 90, if you worked for me, Brian, I would fire you. And I said, because it proves 2 things. You're a bigger jerk as the person who wrote the test, and I'm going to spend more time with you than my family, and I want to spend 8 hours with somebody like that. And I said, I'm going to supervise you. If you're smarter than me, you're always going to be one step ahead. And Brian, the guy proved my point in his comment to my short. He said, well, then you don't want overperforming people. Went on to toot his own horn. I was tempted to say, your comment just proved exactly what I said. Nobody reading this comment will want you in their office. You are welcome, Don. You're all right. Woo, there we go. So, Jeff, there you go. Victorious test taker in the house, Jeff. Don went in that cave multiple times, saw her Series 7 dragon, Finally slayed that Series 7 Dragon, Don. Right on, right on, right on. Don, thank you so much, too. We love Victorious Test Takers coming back on Tuesdays to join us and help buck up people, right? So part of it is you're not alone. We're here every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Arizona time. And how cool, Don? Who knows? Maybe they're struggling. And maybe it's Jeff. And, he's already told us he's going back in there. And then Don shows up and proves what Brian and I are talking about. So stick with it. Wow, that's so cool. I'm taking the Series 7, a bit confused on AMT and the wording. When is a bond subject to the AMT? Well, it's the type of bond. There's two things you got to be subject to the AMT first, and then it would be based on the bond. And yeah, they're not going to be tax free. So Brian put it on the board. It's called an IDR, Industrial Development Revenue Bond, or IDA. These are what we call private activity bonds. They're not supporting a public purpose. So there's a couple test questions here. Corporate credit backs the bonds. So this would be like we issue some industrial development bonds or revenue bonds, agency bonds to build Boeing a new factory in South Carolina, for example. And Boeing's credit quality is what backs those bonds. So that's one test question. Second test question, I say, are you, Macy, subject to the AMT? Now, it's a binary suitability question. Don't get in the weeds here. It's a simple yes or no. If the client says yes, then we're not going to recommend industrial development revenue bonds because they're subject to the AMT. So very testable, and I think it's pretty straightforward. I think sometimes test prep vendors make that a little more complicated than it needs to be. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, you're right. I don't think there's more than one question. The one that I hear most often is the suitability. If you know your customer's subject to the alternative minimum tax, then you're not going to recommend this. Anything else is suitable other than this thing, right? And again, just like Dean said, you can call it a couple of different things: industrial development bond, industrial development revenue, private purpose bond. You just got to worry about those little synonyms sometimes. But it's the only bond. It's subject to the AMT. The only one.
Love it. And testable. Hello from Indiana. Hello. Taking 65 Thursday, reviewing laws and theories tomorrow. That's kind of interesting. Most people, Tanya, say law and regulations, but there are theories. Theories aren't true. Theory is just a way of explaining things. The more a theory can explain, the better the theory is. And yes, there are theories on 65. 77, Brian, you better tweak your test, make them a little tougher. People aren't usually doing that well on your exams. That's great. Again, Tanya, I think that's a mark you can rely upon, confirmed by, listen, today, I know he's going to pass. Don't you love it, a tutoring session like this? He was doing Kaplan, and he had some very high scores. He said, what do you think? And I said, I don't think you're at risk at all with those scores, assuming you haven't memorized them. I said, would you like to do some new questions you haven't seen? I said, the danger of this is that the phraseology is going to be different, and you're not probably going to score as high as you are scoring on Kaplan. Or would you like to do some Kaplan questions? And he said, well, let's do some different questions. So I pulled up your PDF, Brian, and we were doing your questions. And like this, remind me of this, his score was confirming his Kaplan scores. Good. And I have a little more confidence of Brian's scores than Kaplan's score. I think Kaplan's excellent. But I was just like, how great it was to be able to tell him, hey, listen, you're in good shape. And I would poke around and ask him more questions about things. I said, man, as a tutor, I just can tell you, I so respect the dedication, discipline, and organization. I know, Tanya, that it takes to get a 77 on Brian's test or a 77 rounded on Kaplan. So kudos to you. That's a lot of work. That doesn't come by just osmosis. As brilliant as you might think Brian and I are, we can't get to there by osmosis. You gotta put in the work. Got an 80, Brian. Man, people are killing your exams.
I love it.
It's great. Taking the test on Saturday, feeling more confident. No reason not to. Third attempt. I think you're going to get the dragon this time, Darth. I think you're going to get it. I like it. Darth Brew. I'm thinking maybe you make some good dark beer, right? I love a black lager. I haven't been able to find many black lagers out there, but one of my favorite beers. So yeah,
There's no darker brew than coffee, Dean.
oh, maybe he's coffee guy. Oh man. Well then, screw you. I like coffee too, and I like real strong coffee espressos.
We're looking good, Darth Brew. Looking
Yeah.
good. We like it. Taking a test on Saturday.
So
It's
now that I know
simple.
we're talking about coffee, Brian, I worked graveyard security through college, and I was the security guy for a major mall. And we would go around like midnight. You know, the guy named Rich, he showed me around. We're 1:30, 2 o'clock. We're they're closing down Fridays, and at 4 or 5, John Francois is opening up Vita France. He started his baking, and so the first few days we're going around, people say, "Would you like something to drink?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'll have a hot chocolate." And about the end of the week, Rich says, "Dean, when you work graveyards and somebody asks you if you want something to drink, they mean coffee." And so you're a nice guy, but the idea that you're asking those people to stop their routines and make you a cup of hot chocolate, you need to drink coffee or just say no, thank you. I said, well, I don't drink coffee. And he said, well, either learn to drink coffee
Or say no, thank you.
So my first cup was like this much milk, that much sugar. 2 years of graveyard, triple espressos with John Francois, Vita France. So I was teaching a 65 in Salt Lake, Brian, and I said, where can I get a cup of coffee on this campus? And they said, Dean, there are no bad cats on this campus. Bad cats? What are bad cats? Because caffeine, alcohol, and tobacco, Dean. You will find no caffeine, alcohol, tobacco on this campus. I said, man, I am so not a good prospect. I start every morning with a little caffeine. I end most days with a shot of something, smoke a togi. I'm out. Took the 10 twice. The Victor 10. Victor put the 10 with the 65. I think it's a real slog. Yeah, I think it's one of the more difficult exams just in what it is. And I hate these scores, 67, 69. Full access to pass perfect, few practice tests. Do you have any tips? Brian, sounds like you do. What's your tips?
I think we both do.
You go first.
Go to Kaplan, get rid of pass perfect. I'm done.
Oh, I thought it was going to be more of a. Okay.
I'm done. No, I'm done. As soon as I saw pass perfect, I thought, I'm done. Kaplan.
Victor, here's the challenge with pass perfect. Pass perfect takes people into the weeds unnecessarily. And God knows there's already enough minutia on the Series 10. And so you don't want to go into the weeds unnecessarily. And so they sometimes lead you astray. I think this is in general. Both Brian and I are not big fans of Pass Perfect because I think they're too fat, too much stuff. And, I think that's better than not enough stuff. But too much can be, can contribute to hard testing as anything else. So I'm with Brian. I'm not sure why you only have a few practice tests from Kaplan. Victor, you can buy the Kaplan Q Bank separately. And I love it because it has QIDs in there and has a performance tracker. And Victor, if you have your QIDs, go to deantenneytutoring.setmore.com. And you're more than welcome to join us in a Q&A jam session, or I usually don't let people join office hours unless they paid. But you can join us on an office hour and you can find those QIDs and we can talk about them. We'll bring them up on a shared screen and we can talk through some. So yeah, change vendors, I guess, is Brian's recommendation. My recommendation is to get full access to Kaplan, I think, Brian. So we are on the same thing. And then I would tell you too that this high 60 scores are, I don't think, knowledge deficit. So I think it's some other variable. Could be past perfect. It could be other variables. It's unfortunately, and that's what's so frustrating. It's not that you didn't put in the work and you don't know the content. So Northwest Indiana, taking my second attempt on the 65 this Friday. All right, we're sending you good test fobs. Let's get it done. Your Pacers are looking pretty good. Looks like the Bucks are going to be out here pretty quick. 1 week out on the Series 66, not hired by anyone, testing for the improved hireability. I love it. So, Josh, you can also take the SIE if you haven't already done so. None of the NASA exams require sponsorship, and the SIE does not require sponsorship. Your 66 is a prerequisite to your Series 7, and you don't have sponsorship, but you've already shown them that you're willing to, put in the investment. And I think it will help you. I think you will have improved hire ability because you're less of a speculative investment in human capital when you show up already with an SIE and a 66. So I think smart move, my friend, smart move. Practice exam daily, don't do more than one. Any other supplements? Well, Brian has his paid supplements. I highly recommend Brian's paid supplements. About $100, give or take, depending on the discount. I have an entire suite of playlists on the 66. We both have recommended, Josh, that you start with our 66 podcast. It shows you what it's all about in, I think, 5 or 6 episodes.
Just one other word for my brother from another mother, Josh Lee.
I didn't even notice that.
I know you did. That's okay. Oftentimes, because we run into folks just like you, Josh, they're not hired yet by anyone. And they may not exactly know the proper process, the best practices for studying and passing these exams. There's really kind of an easy 3-part process. The first, when you hear us talking about the Kaplan textbooks and the STC, that's the first place you start, no matter which exam you're taking. Make sure you get through that slog, the textbooks and their practice questions. Then you are ready to supplement with either Dean's videos and or my videos, both are better, right? And then on to the practice files. I find, Dean, a lot of people kind of take an easy way. Our videos are not intentionally meant to be standalone solutions. We are vital bridges between the publishers and the real exam. We're the ones that help get through that mess, concentrate it, distill it down to what is most likely testable. So make sure, and that's for all of you guys out there who do not have sponsorship, make sure you go through those 3 pillars: textbook and practice questions, supplement with Dean's videos or my videos or both, and then the practice exams. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Brian calls that, Josh, his 3-pillar process, right? So those are the 3 pillars to executing a successful study plan. We had somebody who was telling us they're testing tomorrow, right? And you want to get to that timeline and be confident in the execution of your study plan. And you can have confidence in the execution of a 3-pillar study plan. You want to be confident in yourself and you want to be confident in your answers. And confidence in having a well-executed study plan, it leads to confidence. Confidence leads to, I think, at least 10 points anecdotally. And anything we can do to be more confident when we go into that test. Brian's favorite line, one of my favorite lines of Brian, I should say, is when he says, "You take the test, don't let the test take you." And you can't do that if you're not confident, right? If you're not confident, the dragon's going to get you, right? You got to go in there knowing you're going to slay the dragon.
Good scores, Josh. I hope that corresponds well for you for the test. Really good.
Can you explain how partnership taxation works? I understand it's a bit of a broad question. However, it can confuse when you use losses against gains. So I'll give it a brief stab. So on your tax return, Green, the way I think of it, I have 3 baskets of income that I report on. I have paycheck income. That's Dean working for money, earned income. On none of the exams do we really care too much about that, because what we want to do is take some of your money, you working for money, and put it to work for you in portfolio. That's your money working for you. And what we're hoping is that at some point, you, Kareem, have enough money working for you that you don't need to work for your money. What a turn on when I get to call my customer and say, "Hey, Kareem, we've arrived at our financial destination. You now have enough money working for you that you don't need to work for your money. So if you'd like, instead of calling in sick tomorrow, you can call in rich." I say, "What's wrong?" You have an eye problem. I said, "What's wrong with your eye?" "I can't see coming to work because I'm rich." Now, my third and final basket of income I report on is distributions from my partnerships. Partnerships have a pass-through of profits and losses. So you're going to get a K1 that shows you your distributions. For example, the Warriors are a partnership. And, one of the former limited partners of the Warriors took exception to Steve Kerr's political comments. And, he said that the Warriors Didn't win because of Steve Kerr. They won because of Joe Lacob, which I thought was ridiculous. Anyways, you're going to get a K1 with the pass through of the income from the Warriors. And that basket, you can't move anything from there. So if I have passive activity losses, if I was in an oil and gas exploratory program, those losses are stuck. Unlike portfolio, where I can take $3,000 against my paycheck income. So we're going to have partnerships that have passive income flowing through. We're going to have partnerships that have passive activity losses flowing through as distributions. There's no retained earnings. So what would show up as a potential test question? One of my go-to moves, Kareem, sold a lot of partnerships, was say, hey, Kareem, why don't you meet me up at the winery and we'll do a due diligence tour and tasting. And then we can decide what kind of asset allocation you may want to make to the winery. As I was walking this doctor back to his car, he said, Dean, this is kind of embarrassing, but I'm going to take a pass on this partnership, this direct participation program, because it's embarrassing how many I already have and how many losses are flowing through to me. And I said, well, doctor, as you know, those losses are trapped there. And what you need to do is make a $300,000 asset allocation to this winery because this winery throws through passive income. So we want to match passive income generators, like my winery, a pig, with passive activity losses, a POW. So here's a test question. A client has a large amount of passive income. What might you recommend? I said, well, Kareem, why don't we take a flyer on an oil and gas exploratory wildcat program? If we don't find any oil and gas, at least you can use those passive activity losses against your passive income. Now, this live stream Q&A doesn't lend itself well to a whiteboard, but Brian certainly has one. And I see he's got something up there. There we go. Right. So there's Brian is showing you those distributions. So that is a separate part of your tax return, Kareem. Right. So that's what I would say. Now, if I think Brian and I would agree. If I don't, Brian, you can. No, I don't agree with you. But I think when I get weak, I'll say it this way. When people say, do I got to read the book? I say, you got to read the book. I got to read the book. You got to read the book. And when I get weak, I say, okay, you can skip the partnership chapter. There's maybe 2 or 3 partnership questions. And test prep vendors get way in the weeds about recourse notes and non-recourse notes and cost basis and, carryovers and cost sharing. It's basically do you know the types of partnerships available? And do you know the distinction between a GP and an LP? That's it. If you tell me you missed 7 because of partnerships, I'm going to say, Kareem, you have bigger problems elsewhere, my friend. What do you think, Brian?
Absolutely. That's right. I was just going to do that as well. And tell them that I don't even think they go into these losses and profit partnerships like they did with the old Legacy Series 7 that you and I took when it was 250 questions.
Yes.
That's where most of that content in those textbooks come from, is that old Legacy 7 that's no longer, half of it's not even tested anymore.
You can find any podcast episode, Kareem, where I made a rant on legacy questions. I get it because nobody wants to get rid of questions. Nobody wants to say I have less content, less questions. And so the old Series 7 was 2 3-hour sessions. So 6 hours, 250 questions. Those days you would get 10 or 12 partnership questions.
Right.
You would get 7 or 8 margin questions. There was a lot more muni minutia. But as Brian has just said, one of our pet peeves is nobody wants to cull their content. Nobody's removing stuff. They, Brian, are not doing distillation. It's getting flabbier. It's getting bigger. So it's a frustration. It's a frustration, Kareem, because Brian and I, we don't mind answering questions, but we ask questions we know people are never going to encounter on the actual Series 7. And the psychosis is coming from their test prep vendor. And we just, we're not bashing Past Perfect, but I think Past Perfect is guilty of this. I would call them the most guilty test prep vendor on this, having legacy questions.
That's right.
So, hello from Northwest Indiana. I'm taking my second attempt on 65 Friday. Would you be able to do an overview of derivative investments you could expect to see on the? Well, sometimes people have unreasonable expectations about what we can do in a Tuesday night live stream on derivative investments. I'll start here. There's only a handful of these. And
Exactly.
so it's always tough to make editorial decisions about where do you spend time. So in my 65 list, I find myself putting in option videos, taking them out, putting them in, because I just don't know how much time you want to chew up in this, right? They're very basic questions. They're usually about hedging. There might be one or two questions on futures. Let's see, Brian says one or two. I say one or two, but
Yep, that's exactly right.
the futures question is pretty straightforward. Maybe one question on the difference between futures and forwards, and maybe another question on either going long or short futures. And futures are easier. Futures pretty simple: up, go long, buy the future; down, sell the future. So you don't have to deal with calls and puts and all that stuff. I don't think an overview would be helpful to you because I think it might make you think it's more important. Go to my 66 playlist, and you can find the options, basic options that you might want to watch. And I do comment on the questions I think you could see. I also have explicated the 65 test specifications. I do go over options there. So I would refer you to those. I will link in the video description, maybe not tonight, maybe tomorrow on that. Brian, your thoughts on this is what makes 65 so challenging.
Exactly.
It could easily be, 2, 3, 4 hours of study time, and I'm not sure if there's not other places I'd spend that time.
You line up 100 people against the wall, say how many option questions, and it's going to be anywhere between 1 and 4 option questions on the Series 65.
Yeah.
Series 66, you might get 1, but you've just taken the Series 7, so it's a lot easier. I don't even deal with options in 66. 65, right? You got the 1 to 4 on the actual options, and then when it comes to futures and forwards, just like Dean said, 1 to 2 questions. That's it.
Yeah. So be careful. I say this all the time. Make sure you stay on the broad avenues and highways of the content.
Dean, I tell people constantly, right, with all the textbooks and all the practice questions, if you're not good on the 90% of the core content, this kind of stuff, right, registrations and definitions of persons, disclosures for IAs, that core content, that's where you got to be the best, man, because that's what's ultimately going to get you past these.
That's right. Because the problem is, if you got to pay attention to weighting, right? If you're spending all this time and you're not on the broad avenues and highways, you don't have enough content things to drag you over the finish line, right? So really pay attention to that. And I don't know you well enough from this live stream, so I just if I'm talking out of school, I apologize. But how many times, Brian, do we find people that haven't mastered that 90% of content?
That's exactly
right. These cul-de-sacs and alleys, and I'm like, hey, 65 over here, man.
Come back. Kenny, come back.
Are there really as many questions on the 65 out bonds as show up? Well, I always think there's always more questions of bonds than stocks in general on these exams. And people with their stock jocks, oh man, I'm a stock guy. I go, well, okay, well, so I'm not quite sure what to answer about as a practice test. But as we said, 65, I'll say it this way, Jack, the solar guy. I like that. I'm off grid, so solar is really important. Anyways, I'll say it this way. I think bonds are a hell of a lot more important, Jack, on 65 than are derivatives.
There you go.
Right? I mean, and you got 3 issuers, you got corporate issuers, you got municipal issuers, you got the government. And so I'm not sure who your test prep vendor is. 2030, I think, is a little high, but definitely some bond questions. I think here's what I would say about vendors giving you a higher number. There's certain things that Brian and I and test prep vendors just know are on the 65. And so we're going to try and get you to practice and drill and rehearse in those so we know you get them. And that's what we meant, right? We're not going to give you, 20 option questions because we just know that's not worth practice, drilling, and rehearsing as much as bonds. Which vendor, Kaplan, STC, or Desquig have most similar? I'm in the whole Rhode Island, by the way. Well, CT, that I always say that Brian in general always has better correlations, but he doesn't have a Q bank. All Brian offers is an intellectual inventory through a practice test, which has strong correlation to the actual exam. So I don't think it's fair to put Brian into this conversation about questions similar because that's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to do a diagnostic that gives you kind of a mark in help you with your expectations as it relates to the actual exam. I still think his questions are most similar in this regard. And when people give me grief, I'm not Brian's defender. I say, call Brian. He's more than happy to talk to you about his content and why it's there. And he's got every once in a while, but people consider to be gotcha questions. But I say, well, read it again. I don't really think it's a gotcha question. Now,
this is a great question, Dean, because we get it on all the exams, not just the SIE, right? Who most writes questions similar to the test? You know what I tell them? No one does.
Yeah.
No one is allowed to be, duplicate those test questions. It's copyrighted material. Yeah. They will come and fine us. Yeah. If we duplicate those test questions.
Test prep vendors in the past.
So no one's really that similar. And again, some of the exams vary more so than the others.
Danger.
But that's why Kaplan, STC, Test Geek, Dean, whomever you're doing test questions with, even if they are dissimilar to one another, that diversity gives you strength no matter how they're tested.
CT, I just want to tell you that it's also a red flag when people ask this question, because the danger is, rather than learning the concepts and content, you memorize questions that you think are similar to the exam. And the only time we have people who score very high and do everything we've asked and they miss their mark is when they have memorized questions and answers. And so I think even the nature of that question in and of itself is a red flag, because you shouldn't be trying to find questions that are most similar. You should be trying to learn the content so that you can deal with any different phraseology you encounter, right? So I'm with Brian. We don't believe in monogamy as it relates to test. What I mean by that is, if you can get multiple vendors, as long as you're comfortable with different voices and it's not causing you to get dinged, we like that. And then what you use that for is confirmation. You say, oh, Brian had a question like this, Test Geek. STC had a question like this. Kaplan has a question like this. Ding, 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 confirmation. If it's a question you see on Kaplan, you don't see it anywhere else, yeah, maybe they're getting a little carried away. The guy Kaplan, I love him, but his name is Chuck. He's very eccentric, and every once in a while, Chuck has got a question in the rationale. He goes, well, you won't see this on your test. So, and then remember, Brian is not trying to provide you with similar questions at the exam. He's trying to provide you with a score that's correlated to the exam. Those are different things. 66 tomorrow. Well, make sure you get some sleep. I don't know about you, but when I'm tired, my reading skills are greatly diminished. Statutory disqualification. Let's stop there. Statutory disqualification means you're disqualified by statute. The regulatory authorities need not explain to you why they're denying your registration. Any other denial of your registration, they'd have to explain to you. I kind of think of it like when I was growing up. Sometimes mom would tell me what I did and why I was wrong. Other times mom would say, you figure it out. So yes, a felony conviction of the past 10 years is a reason for statutory disqualification. Yes, any felony. I used to, as a joke in class, Brian, say, anybody answer this yes on their U4? This guy raised his hand. He goes, but Dean, it was no big deal. I said, well, you're confused, my friend. The definition of a felony is that it was a big deal. And it's any felony. Now, the misdemeanor would be for securities or money-related misdemeanors. So it's not like a misdemeanor and you got drunk and you streaked across the campus as a college kid. That's not what we're talking about. You come to work and you check this box, yes. I said, what's this about? And you say, Dean, I was a teller at the bank. I kept coming up short in my till, and I was convicted for misdemeanor embezzlement. I said, what do you want to do at my broker-dealer? You said, Dean, I want to work in the cashiering department. I said, I don't think so, right? The last one would be, for the misdemeanor, it has to be money or securities related. The last one is, I call it, don't we know you from somewhere? Have you ever been denied, suspended, or revoked registration in the past? Oh, man, who are you again? Oh, Jordan Belfort. Jordan Belfort is the guy from Wolf of Wall Street, right? If he ever got back into the business, he'd be statutory disqualified under two reasons. He's a convicted felon, and he's also been barred from the securities industry. Brian, anything else you would add to
that? No, you've got it.
Pretty straightforward.
It really is. Yeah.
I had a guy who told me, Brian, he didn't read his U4 and he checked every box yes. His compliance officer called him and said, Let me read some of the things you've said yes to. I know some firms, Brian, to give them a questionnaire that is the U4 question so they can answer, so they actually know before they fill the U4 what the answers are going to be. In our business, not a test question, but in our business, a clean U4 is somebody going to answer no to all the questions. And so it's not a test term, but in our business, a dirty U4 is somebody who has a yes answer, and some answers are dirtier than others. And I think it's on broker check incredibly funny that people are throwing rocks around, sometimes don't realize they're on broker check. And I'm like, I said, Liz, you can check me on broker check and it'll tell you exactly what I claim to be. And then, other people you go broker check and you go, ooh. Demographic of people. Did we miss one? There we go. We got to that. Demographic would be most concerned. Well, it's not a demographic. The question isn't about demographic. It's the currency risk itself. So if you're turning a foreign currency into dollars, that is foreign, where that comes up. I don't know what exam you're taking, but all test takers should know. If I buy an American depository receipt, the underlying business is conducted in the foreign currency, I have foreign currency risk. I take care of Group de Modelo, or, well, they sell a lot of beer in the U.S. Telefonos to Mexico. They're collecting bills and pesos, right? So they got to turn the pesos into dollars. Jack, the solar guy, I'm not sure again what exam you're taking. Series 7, a euro bond would have currency risk because we had to turn the euros or Swiss francs or British pounds back into dollars. So there's 2 that I'd be aware of, ADRs. The last thing I'd be thinking about this as it relates to what test you're taking would be hedging. And we have a memory aid device called Epic. And so if I'm a U.S. exporter, I would buy puts on the Japanese yen, for example. If I'm a U.S. importer of European wine, I would buy puts buy calls on the euro. So those are the 3. I don't think there's any question about demographics of people who would most be concerned. It's the investment itself and then who owns the investment, right? I guess if you tell me I'm a former jet setter, right? And so I would worry about currency risk if I'm financing stuff overseas. Anything you would add to that, Brian? Are you agree with me? It's not a demographic question; it's an investment vehicle.
Yeah, depending on what exam it is. Again, like you said. One other thing: would you consider that a systemic risk, a systematic risk?
Ooh, these judgment questions are tough. When I think of risks in the system, I think of the tendency of things to move together, and I think then can I mitigate it through diversification? So I'm going to say no. And the reason I'm going to say no, and this on judgment questions, Jack, the solar guy, this is what Brian and I do, having cocktails instead of what normal people do. But in these judgment questions, right, who knows what the right answer is. But I'm going to say no, Brian, because I think I can avoid it and I can diversify it.
You certainly can.
And what do you think? What's your answer? Do you think it is?
From a test-taking standpoint,
you're going to say yes, it is?
It's considered a systematic risk.
Okay.
Right. Because it would affect the entire Japanese market.
Right now, I think, Jack, this has been a very interesting. You're taking the test in such interesting economic times. And Ken Griffin is a big supporter. He owns a hedge fund called Citadel, a huge market-making firm called Citadel. And he's starting to push back on, the president. And one of the things, Jack, he said is that the president is damaging the brand of the U.S. And what he meant by the brand is the strength of the dollar as a reserve currency, as a home for capital. Kind of interesting. So the dollar has been weak here of late, right? And for me, that's not good. It was my first time on the phone. Took the midterm, got an 81. Other than that, a bunch of Kaplan, incessant reading of videos. Trevor, I love it. Incessant reading of videos. Woo, warms my heart. Missed by there you go. So made the pivot. I love it. Put in the work. Now that as 24 on use can be rolled over, a Roth does not need me to take with all questions pertaining. I think you're in the weeds, Jack. There is no questions along those lines. The question about a Roth is no RMD. All IRAs have to have earned income, right? So again, I don't think this is a broad avenue on the highway. The questions on 529s is comparing them in a beauty contest with a Coverdale and knowing why the 529 will win hands down the beauty contest. Those are the questions. So I'm not even sure what the question. Let me go back and read Jack's the solar guy. Now that it's 2024, unused fund, first point. NASA and FINRA don't like to get into things that date themselves in QBEX. So they don't like to even discuss 2000 things and changes. And it takes them forever when there is a change. How long, Brian, did it take NASA to go to 73 from 72 and a half? It took them forever. Can be rolled over in a Roth IRA. Does that need to be taken into account? No, none of this needs to be taken into account. Zero. What is the difference between tips and strips? Well, Cody, there's a huge difference. They're different things. So they're very different. A tip is a Treasury inflation protected security where the U.S. Treasury agrees to adjust the principal they owe you semi-annually based on CPI. And Brian and I always tell test takers, Cody, the coupon does not change. So if you have a 5% tip, it's 5%. Now, 5% on the adjusted principal will be more money in your pocket. Now, a strip is a different thing. A strip is the U.S. Treasury version of a zero coupon bond. And all zero coupon bonds are very good for somebody who needs a set sum of money at some future date. Maybe the target is 18 years old for the kid when he starts college. And we would use a strip for that. Strips are good for somebody who wants to lock in a rate of return. They're good for somebody, they trade flat. So strips and inflation protection for tips. Yeah, I think the use of them you got right, but they're entirely different things. Hi. There you go. Okay. Yeah. Joining from Georgia. Oh, my goodness. I spent a lot of time in Alpharetta, Georgia. Not in years, but boy. Started studying for 65 again yesterday, feeling discouraged and failing. Oh, get rid of that stinking thinking. Lane, no stinking thinking is allowed in our live streams. Lane, I want you tonight and tomorrow morning. You're going to go into your bathroom. You're going to look in the mirror and you're going to say, mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the greatest 65 test taker of them all? Lane, Lane, Lane. Hoorah! Right? So I'm teasing you, Lane. I'm glad you've come to us. That's what we're here for on Tuesdays. Is buck people up. Let them know, like you're not alone. We're with you in spirits. And as Brian and I, we're surprisingly, as people who do what for a living, I think, Brian, we got to be the most simpatico people with 65 test takers, don't you think? I mean, because are we the only two people that really think that's one of the toughest exams? I mean,
there's no doubt in my mind. It is, yeah.
You completed Kaplan and Brian's courses, Lane. Fantastic. So you come, yeah. Thanks for the community encouragement. You come every week, my friend Lane, and we're here for you. Remember, we also do our few Q&A jam session on my booking page. You don't have to have a question. You can just join us for the fellowship and camaraderie and morale boosting, and feel free to go over there and join us for that as well. Can you clarify the advantages of a small business which does not plan to offer common stock would pursue? Again, Jack, I just think you're in the weeds. All these questions are not on the broad avenues and highways of any exam. C Corps are for raising large amounts of capital. S Corps and LLC are pass-through vehicles. So, Jack, I collaborate with people like Kaplan. Kaplan is a subsidiary of Graham Holdings. And sometimes they say, Dean, we're concerned that you may become a competitor. Yeah, and I say, well, one way you know that's not true is because you're making checks payable to Guru Exam Prep LLC. I just want the money, man. Yeah. I don't want to set up a corporation and compete. And I told him, I teased him, Jack. I said, the minute I tell you to make that check payable to Guru Exam Prep Incorporated, then you should be concerned. Because that means I got common stockholders, I can issue preferred, I can issue bonds, I plan on raising a lot of money. So this would be an attorney question. When you ask an attorney, what kind of business structure should I consider? I am not an attorney, Jack, but I say, do you plan on having retained earnings and building the business? Do you plan on someday raising large amounts of capital? C Corp. Do you plan on, Jack, wanting a pass-through of income and losses that you can use against your personal tax return? S corp. The first brokerage firm I worked for, Jack, was an S corp, and I went to Jeffrey and I said, we can make money if we tried. He said, Dean, we're not trying to make money. This is a tax shelter for my dad. I said, really? And I walked down the hall to his dad's office. I said, Mr. K, are we trying to make money? He said, Dean, I'm so disappointed you would ask such a silly question. Of course. He said, I have it as an S corp, so that in these early years, at least if we do use money, I can write it off. It passes through my personal tax return. And when we start to make money, which I hope is soon and lots of it, it'll pass through and it'll be taxed once. Jack, if the IRS comes into our brokerage firm, our S corp, and wants to talk to somebody, should I send them to Jeffrey's office? This is a tax shelter for daddy? Or should I send them to Mr. K's office? The tax benefits were important, but they're not the primary motivation. You can't let the tax tail wag the tax dog. Now, besides the flow through, knowing that C corps don't flow through profits and losses, and S corps and LLCs do, the other test question here is S corps are limited to 100 shareholders, none of which can be non-resident aliens. And then LLCs have managing members, and I would be able to contrast an LLC with a partnership, right? So, Jack, I'm the managing member of Guru Exam Prep LLC. I'm not a general partner. So that means I don't have all that risk. General partners have unlimited liability. LLCs don't. On the 6566, there is a question about a family business organized as a partnership, and the husband and wives are general partners, and they ask why they might consider dissolving the partnership and reorganizing as an LLC. It would be liability, right? So there you go. Brian, anything to add to that?
No.
Remember too, Jack, I think your questions are good. So I'm adding, again, I always apologize in advance on these live streams because, it's hard to know who you are and who we are, all this stuff. I would add that make sure that you know that product knowledge. I think you're going to be great financial advisors based on the quality of your questions, Jack. But product knowledge comes from sales efforts, not taking these tests. So make sure you don't put the cart before the horse. Is that how it goes? Make sure you're focused on making your mark, and then how do we use all these things to help clients? A 3-day full, Cody. Well, Brian and I don't think either one. We're kind of blessed. The problem is, I don't know, Brian. I'll just speak for myself. I'm not as hungry as I used to be. I'm just not. I feel bad, Cody. I have a off grid. We have 3 cats. Only one of now who is working, and we have 2 fat cats. They become indoor cats, and all they do is they can't even jump off the refrigerator. I feel like I'm one of those fat cats, right? I'm not interested in working out. I love teaching. Cody, do a 3-day class for Kaplan. We had 65 registrants. I teach the Series 7, a collaborative class between Kaplan and Guru Exam Prep LLC. I'm not a Kaplan employee. Anyways, I took a poll, Brian. I was thinking about not teaching that class because there's just other things I'd like to be doing. I love teaching, and that's why I do it. The money is like ice cream money. What I get paid to teach a 3-day Kaplan class, Brian and I could probably drink up in a couple hours. I'm joking, but that's because of what we drink. But, anyways, I took a poll, and a lot of those people came from social media. So I'll do that. I also do a 66 3-day class through Kaplan. So in terms of Brian and I do a joint venture, maybe in Las Vegas someday we'll put on like a high-end 3-day extravaganza. Bring your families. They can go, play while we're out teaching class. All right. Woo!
3-0.
Ismail has completed his
hat trick.
Registration hat trick. All right. Kudos. I think it's about time for our drawing. Let's just get a couple more.
Yes, it is. Let's do it.
Okay. So, Brian, we want to do that. Let's see if I got anything here. Full day in Arizona. What are people trying to get us out of retirement? ETFs would be taxed over the course of their investment. ETFs are just like stocks. So your cost base is what you bought the ETF for. Cost base when you turn it into money. Sales proceeds when you turn it back into the investment back into money.
Yeah, there's nothing special about it.
Yeah. I don't know, Jack. I mean, again, those are judgment questions. We used to have a term called ESG investments.
Socially conscious.
This is an investment company that would shy away from fossil fuels and firearms and alcohol. Training consultants, I think, is a little skinny. I love Notman. They're white glove. They're very expensive, but I think the value proposition is there. You pay them a lot of money, but they're good. Brian Marks participates in some of my social media, so I always figure that's an honor that he does so. Thank you. You're welcome. Taking the SIE. All right. Okay. I apologize here, but we try and start and end on time. If we miss you, just come back Tuesday. Taking the Series 7 Chief. Join us for the thing. Options are in the green. Love it. Love it. And then remember, go to the booking page. There's jam session. There's things we can help you for there. I'm just cherry picking, Brian. Okay, let's go get the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune. Brian, what? Don't put this in there until I get the.
Nope, I'm waiting for you.
Oh, good. Okay, so let me go put it over here so I can see what you're going to do. All right, I'm ready for you.
Okay.
Playing.
Playoffs.
Yeah, we got NBA playoffs. We got
NHL playoffs.
So now wait, I got to put it in here. So give me a chance here to get caught up. Boom. Okay. Now, if you want to enter the drawing for the coaching call, put playoffs into the chat exactly as Brian has it on the board, and I will bring up the Wheel of Fortune. Let me bring up the Wheel of Fortune. It's not actually a wheel; it's a drawing thing. Share screen. Okay, boom. Boom. There we go. Let me get rid of Marcel. I saw Marcel. Sorry, Marcel. We're kind of skimming by. Let me get rid of the banner here. All right. I think we're ready. So we got 18 entries. Any more? 19 entries. Now, remember, if you win, let me put that up there. You go to Dean Denny Tutoring. Banners. Where's my banner? There you go. And you go to the class tab to claim your coaching call. There'd be a class tab. On the class tab, you'll see coaching call, and that's what you win. And then, it'll send you a Zoom link, and then I'll show up as your coach, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. 22. Going once. Going twice. All right, let's do the draw. Boom.
And the winner is
Rania. Okay, Rania, go to deankennytutoring.setmore.com. Go to the class tab. You'll see the coaching call. Register a coaching call. I'll see you then. Bring whatever you want to talk about to the coaching call. If you have difficulties, you just send me an email at dean@guruexamprep.com. You shouldn't have a problem. And again, just to be clear, you did not win. You did not win a tutoring session at the date and time of your choice. You won a coaching call. All right. So, Brian, that looks like another Tuesday. We'll see you next Tuesday for this ritual. We do it every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Arizona time. Remember, inch by inch, your exam is a cinch. Yard by yard, your exam is hard. And Brian, you say?
gotta learn to keep it simple. Stay with what you know. You take the test. Don't let the test take you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye. Okay.